I'm Caryn Hartglass. You're listening to It's All About Food. Thank you. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for sharing with me this precious hour of your life. You're probably aware that in October, we celebrate, not a good word, we acknowledge breast cancer with Breast Cancer Awareness Month. That's October. It's such a strange thing to have 1 month to acknowledge something that has affected so many people, not just women. Men too can have breast cancer. And we focus in October, for some reason, on this prevalent disease. It's just like holidays, where on a certain holiday we're supposed to think about all the things we're grateful for and give thanks. Why aren't we doing these things every day? Why do we need a special day or a holiday? That's just the way it is. But I'm going to take advantage of Breast Cancer Awareness Month today, October 15th. We're right smack in the middle of October. Because I was going to talk about breast cancer for a number of reasons, and then I realized, oh, how convenient, it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So let's just package that all together. What got me started was one of my very best friends died of breast cancer in 1994. And it's always been emotional for me, thinking about it, talking about it, and it's been 30 years. I've talked about why I do this podcast, and the primary reason is because I want to eliminate pain and suffering for the voiceless, non-human animals, but also for people who are suffering from diseases from consuming animals. It's all connected. It's all about food. But there have been other things in my life that have shaped my choices. And one of the reasons I do this podcast, and one of the reasons we founded ResponsibleEatingAndLiving.com, was to share my story about going through cancer and all the things that I've learned. But on top of that, or at the foundation, was my first experience with cancer and someone very close to me, which was this woman I'm talking about. And I learned so much since then that if I can help anyone prevent this experience or minimize this experience in any way, I want to be a part of that. When my friend was diagnosed, it was a recurrence. The first day I met her, she told me she had been diagnosed with breast cancer, and she was very young at the time. We didn't have an internet at the time. We just had libraries, books, magazines, and word of mouth. And yeah, doctors and people in the medical profession. But there were a few things that I recognized that might help her. And one was consuming water and clean water. And what I did was I got a subscription to a local spring water delivery service. It was a lot for one person, and I shared it with her. So we had the dispenser in my office, and then I would bring her a big container and keep it in her office because we worked together in the same company. And we would often go to lunch. And I was always stressing the importance of cruciferous vegetables, even back then. And this was the late 80s to early 90s. I realized the importance of cruciferous vegetables, not to the point that I know today. And I also was trying to get her off of consuming cheese because I knew the impact of dairy back then and the impact of consuming hormone, because dairy is a hormone soup. So those were a few things. But since then, I've learned so much more. As I've mentioned many times on this program, I moved to France in 1992, and I lived there until 1996. My friend passed away in 1994. We wrote letters to each other. You know, those old-fashioned handwritten things that you'd put in the mail. And this would travel far from California to France. And then I had this idea that we could record our letters on cassette tape and mail those cassettes to each other. Because back then, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have smartphones, we didn't have Zoom and FaceTime and the ability to record instantly an audio message and send it anywhere in the world. I'm just marveling at the dramatic change in technology over such a short period of time. I saved one audio tape. I don't know what happened to the others, but I'm so grateful that I have that one. And I haven't listened to it for a long time, until yesterday. And I'm not exactly sure what prompted me to listen, but I sat down for an hour and had this conversation with my friend. I listened to her talking to me for an entire hour, and it was so clear, and it felt like she was just right there. And I got so much more out of it, listening to it like it was the first time. There was so much in that tape. We'll never know why one individual gets a disease. We can only imagine, or we can only glean from statistics, for example, from epidemiological data, and put together commonalities in people's diet and lifestyle and genetics, environmental factors, to get an idea of what their risk was and what risks may have contributed to their disease. And some of the things I listened to in this particular recording, it's funny, I was going to say I was listening to a podcast, because it kind of was like I was listening to a podcast. My friend was a type A personality, very driven and very judgmental of herself. And she talked in this particular recording about how she learned to be more gentle on herself. I'm not saying that that was a contributor to the disease, but it can increase your risk, creating your own stress within yourself. In addition to eating poorly, I remember very often that she would go to the vending machine for something to satisfy her hunger in the moment, rather than preparing and organizing her life to eat the most nourishing things. Now, I don't want to sound judgmental. I am just trying to evaluate what happened so that I can understand better and perhaps help myself and other people in our quest for improving our quality of life and increasing the possibility of longevity of a good and quality life. I also want to add that this particular person was slim. And later on in this program, we are going to talk about weight, because increased weight, wearing extra pounds, having extra pounds on our bodies increases our risk of disease, especially breast cancer. But this obviously was not the case for her. She was slim and she exercised. And during this recording, she reminded me that her mother was going through a breast cancer experience at the same time. Now, her mother caught it and took care of it, and her mother ended up living a very long time. She actually just recently died, some 28, 29 years later. And I learned later in time that her sister also went through a breast cancer experience, and she survived. So there may have been a genetic factor. But one thing we also notice is that when particular chronic diseases occur within a family, it can be genetic, but it can also be diet and lifestyle because many families eat the same way. It could also be environmental. Environment can be a contributing factor. If you live in a place that is contaminated, either the soil is contaminated and the produce that is grown there that you're consuming has high residues of toxic materials, or perhaps it's polluted, the air is polluted, the water can be polluted, so many different factors. It was fun and it was funny. My friend was talking about she and her husband had bought a new computer that had the ability, when the computer was on, to accept faxes. Does anybody even remember what a fax is? Do some people still use some companies still use faxes. It was just another reminder of how technology has just exploded and how we can use that today to our advantage. Yes, I know we also use technology to our disadvantage because there is so much misinformation out there. But I like to focus on using it for good. There was a lot in that audio tape that meant so much to me, and I'm so glad I still have it and remembered to listen to it. I want to talk about some other old tapes. So back in the late 90s, I got into yoga, and I used to do my yoga routines with videos. Anybody remember VCRs? Yeah. Well, I had some favorites, and I transferred some of those favorites onto DVDs so I could still watch them. I would throw them up on a big flat screen TV and watch it large, or on my computer. And then I moved to watching them or listening to them on my smartphone with AirPods. And then I discovered they were all uploaded to YouTube. And now I can watch them on YouTube without having to look and find my DVDs. I'll tell you who my favorites were. Patricia Walden and Rodney Yee of Yoga Journal. And Bryan Kest. And there were a few particular videos that I really, really adored. And I've been doing the Bryan Kest videos. I have Power Yoga 1, 2, and 3, and occasionally I bring them out. And they're always challenging. I have yet to be able to get exactly to the level where I can do them all perfectly. But that's what yoga is all about. Because there's no perfect pose. Everything is perfect in the moment, and you take what you can from it, and you breathe through it. But in my new quest to lower my cholesterol and reduce my plaque that has collected from a recent diagnosis that I found of my carotid duplex, in addition to the daily cardio exercise, I've committed to myself to add other routines slowly. And my latest addition is morning yoga. So I started with a Bryan Kest video, which I'm familiar with. And then I thought, I need to go back to those beginner tapes. And I tried the Patricia Walden beginner. And I remember earlier in time that I got bored with that tape because it was basic poses, very slow. And this time, I really enjoyed it because now I'm understanding the value of going slow. Just because you're not zipping through a million poses doesn't mean you can't get tremendous value. And I was realizing that there's a lot of work that I can be doing in those poses that I thought were so basic. There's no perfect pose, and you can always go further. You can always go deeper. You can always improve. I really enjoyed that video. And she has this great relaxation part at the end. Many yoga videos will include the last pose, which is lying on the ground so you can relax. You can relax your feet, your palms are up, and you're supposed to do this for about 5 minutes or so. One thing that always frustrated me about some of these programs is they never extend that last pose, corpse pose, for 5 minutes. They'll usually do it for 2 minutes and then the music ends. Why didn't they extend it to 5 minutes? But I digress. But this particular beginner video has an excellent relaxation segment where she's explaining all the things that you can do to relax in your body. I really appreciated that. But what I really wanted was her flexibility video. And I found it, and I did it yesterday. It has a segment where you do 5 back bends, upward bow. And I'll admit I'm out of shape with that. But I remember when I used to do them, how I loved the invigorating feeling of back bends. Have you done a back bend? And if you can't, I understand. There are many different poses that you can do that are similar, that will activate the spine and stretch the spine. But upward bow, that's like the best. And I did them yesterday. They did not look pretty. I could not hold on to them as long as necessary in the video. But I'm going to work at it now. And it brings me joy. It's hard. And it was kind of like going back to an old friend, listening to an old friend. So first I really did listen to an old friend on an audio tape, and now I'm listening to my, quote, old friends, my yoga teachers. As I talked about on this program, sometimes with experts and authors, there is value in going slowly. And it's less difficult. It can be more pleasurable. It won't turn you away from exercise if you start slowly. Who are we competing with? Why do we have to go fast? We should just do what is beneficial for ourselves and nourishing for ourselves. I'm really enjoying it. And as this program is called, It's All About Food, there were numerous times in this particular Patricia Walden program where she talked about the pose is nourishing. The physical pose can nourish your bodies in ways that are different from food. So I'm using this program to nourish my body, nourish my spine, nourish my mind. It's all good. Something else that made me want to talk about breast cancer today had to do with Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I'll admit, I was listening to WNYC. I frequently listen to Bryan Lair on the WNYC app. And he was recently interviewing Dr. Lisa Newman, a surgical oncologist, who was one of the authors on a new breast cancer study. And as I was listening, I didn't even listen to the whole podcast because I was busy and it just was pissing me off. But it was about the recent statistics in 2024 of breast cancer incidence, breast cancer mortality, and talking about the different communities that are experiencing increases and decreases. And what I wasn't hearing was, what, everybody? Diet and lifestyle. I made a mental note to review the study that they were talking about, Breast Cancer Statistics 2024, and I thought I would review it and share it with you because I know you get it, and I know you'll appreciate this conversation we're having, as opposed to the conversation Bryan Lair was having with Dr. Lisa Newman, which was just pointing out incident rates and trends, but not talking about the underlying causes of cancer and what we can do not only to reduce the occurrence of the disease and to decrease mortality rates from the disease, but to prevent the disease and others at the same time. I'm going to read to you the conclusion from this study. Breast cancer mortality rates continue to decline steadily from 1989 through 2022 with an overall drop of 44%. That translates to almost 518,000 fewer women dying from breast cancer in the United States during this time. This progress is the result of advances in treatment and earlier detection through screening. However, these interventions have not been disseminated equally. AIAN, American Indian and Alaska Native women, no reduction in mortality, and Black women have 38% higher mortality than white women, despite having lower incidence. Black women have the lowest survival rate of any racial and ethnic group for every breast cancer subtype and stage of disease except localized stage, with which they are 10% less likely than white women to be diagnosed. Also concerning is the continued rise in breast cancer incidence that is particularly striking among Hispanic and AAPI, Asian American and Pacific Islander women who are vulnerable to challenges in access to care. Progress against breast cancer could be accelerated by mitigating racial disparities through increased racial diversity in clinical trials, as well as community partnerships and other initiatives that increase access to high-quality screening and treatment among underserved women. And that's it. Did you get all of that? The key thing that I got out of it was that there are no recommendations for prevention. There are no recommendations for curing this disease, reducing recurrence with diet and lifestyle. The abstract highlights that breast cancer incidence continued an upward trend, rising by 1% annually during 2012 to 2021, largely confined to localized stage and hormone receptor positive disease. Now, hormone receptor positive disease, either estrogen or progesterone, is something that allows breast cancer or cancer cells to grow when influenced by estrogen. How do we not talk about diet and lifestyle when we're talking about hormones? The two are connected, hormones and cancer. When I did a search for a variety of terms in the study, for example, plant, meat, dairy, weight, diet, lifestyle, I came up with only one thing, and that was that the rising trend is mostly confined to HR-positive disease, as I mentioned, and is attributed to associated risk factors such as increased excess body weight. And this is where diet and lifestyle are so important. I'm going to break it down. Obviously, our body weight is affected by the calories we consume. There is a small group of people who will tell you that they can eat the tiniest amount of food and still gain weight. I'm not so sure about that, and I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, for the most of us, when we consume too many calories, we gain weight. It's very simple. The environment also plays a factor, and plastics, for example, different materials that package our food can influence the hormone imbalance that we have in our bodies. And exercise also has a tremendous influence. The most important, the most protective thing one can do in order to reduce the risk of any chronic disease, including breast cancer, and especially breast cancer, is to eat the cleanest, whole food, plant-based, no salt, no sugar, no oil diet, as well as taking certain supplements and exercising, reducing stress, getting enough sleep, not consuming alcohol. Does this sound like a bummer? I have to say that for most of my life, I have been vegan, and I have been consuming a high plant, minimal processed food diet, and I'm realizing now, as I age, that if I really want to maximize the benefits, I have to be all in. And for me, It may not be the same for everyone, but for me, it means SOS-free, salt, oil, sugar-free, no alcohol. Based on our genetics, some of us have a higher risk for certain chronic diseases. And if we know that, we can adjust our diet and lifestyle accordingly. I am feeling so much better now that I am committed to this, as some would say, extreme or rigid lifestyle. I don't see it that way, but okay, cool. But when I read these studies and these statistics that come out, it's very frustrating that diet and lifestyle are not even mentioned. No, this particular article is saying that progress against breast cancer could be accelerated by mitigating racial disparities through increased racial diversity in clinical trials. That's what they want to do. Clinical trials. We know already what can drop these statistics to practically zero. It's not clinical trials. Unless those clinical trials are about comparing diet and lifestyle. But we already have that information, so why are we wasting time? And they also include the importance of community partnerships and other initiatives that increase access to high-quality screening and treatment among underserved women. Now let's step back into that and talk a little bit about high-quality screening. There are numerous diagnostic tools. One in particular for breast cancer is the mammogram. There are many women that swear by the mammogram and say that if they hadn't had their routine mammograms, they would never have been diagnosed, and it saved their life. I understand that. I respect that. We do have to understand something about mammograms first. Mammograms have not been shown to extend lifespan for women. I'll repeat that. Mammograms have not been shown to extend lifespan for women. And there is a risk of radiation. There is a risk of false positive results. Some breast cancers, like postmenopausal breast cancer and prostate cancer, they are slow growing and not clearly shown to benefit from screening. Just a few things to keep in mind. Studies have shown that populations that get regular mammograms do not live longer than populations that don't get them. So the question is, are they helpful? Are they harmful? And this is an individual question. It really depends on your diet, your lifestyle, your genetics, your environment, and your feeling about it, because sometimes just feeling that you have to have a test in order to calm yourself may be beneficial. But the problem is that diagnostic tools like the mammogram take the emphasis off of controlling dietary risk factors. And it gives everyone the impression that screening is the preferred method of protection. But keep in mind, screening does not prevent the cancer. Screening does not prevent the cancer. We're constantly hearing about early detection to find the cancer. It does not prevent the cancer. And because of radiation, it may actually be more harmful, because there's a risk in radiating ourselves, especially a cumulative risk. It's just an ongoing message in the medical community. I remember the title of Dr. Saray Stansik's book, which focuses on multiple sclerosis. The title is What's Missing in Medicine? What's missing? It's changing slowly. Yes, maybe. What's missing is the value of lifestyle changes, the value of nutritional excellence, the value of taking responsibility for our own lives. And this is a message that I am sharing with all of you because it's something that I am doing myself, and perhaps it will motivate others. But I have been given the opportunity, and this isn't about breast cancer, this is about health overall, my high cholesterol, my plaque. I have been given the opportunity to take a drug, to take a statin, to lower my cholesterol, and perhaps minimize my plaque production. And I am choosing, to the best of my ability, to do what I can with my nutrition, to do what I can with my exercise, to do what I can with my lifestyle, so that my numbers will become healthier. My apparent risk will be smaller because I do not want to take a drug. I want to be responsible for my own lifestyle. I want to emphasize, not de-emphasize like the medical community does. I want to emphasize the value of lifestyle changes and self-responsibility. I'm not telling women not to get a mammogram. This is an individual decision. It's based on many things: how dense your breasts are, how healthy your lifestyle is, your genetics. Many things can be used to determine one's decision to test or not test. Some of the key foods that have powerful anti-breast cancer effects are flax seeds, soybeans, and mushrooms. Some people are afraid of eating soy. Even the Conservative American Cancer Society recommends consuming soy. Soy does not contain human estrogen. It contains a plant estrogen that can work magic in balancing our own estrogen in the body. And the good news is that consuming flax seeds, soybeans, and mushrooms are also beneficial, not only for reducing breast cancer risk, but all cancers and chronic disease. And I am enjoying consuming my 2 tablespoons of ground flaxseed every day. It either goes on my fruit bowl in the morning or on my salad. And if I haven't remembered to have my 2 tablespoons every day, which is rare, I'll find some way to consume it. Occasionally, I'll mix it up with 2 tablespoons of chia. I like making chia pudding. It's a really nice thing to do either the night before, like overnight oats. Chia pudding you could make the day before, or you could do it in the morning as long as you let it sit for about an hour so that the chia seeds have soaked in the liquid and aren't so crunchy. And you load it up with berries, and it's amazing. I also wanted to talk about juicing for a moment because, as many of you know, when I went through my ovarian cancer experience, I attributed daily green juicing to my healing and my thriving, and I really believe in the power of green juice. Consuming cruciferous vegetables, leafy green vegetables, adding in celery for minerals, and other vegetables on a regular basis is a great way to quickly get necessary nutrients into the bloodstream. And anybody who asks me about what they can do to heal from a chronic disease, green juicing is like one of the top things that I recommend. And I'm not going to talk about juicing appliances right now, but the technology is over the top, and there are some new juicers out there that are truly amazing that make juicing easy and easy to clean, which is a factor that many people bring up. They don't like to clean the appliance. Just remember that if you need to juice and you don't like cleaning the juicer, it's a gift. It's a gift to you to do all of that. I always like to change the perspective and make it positive. But I am not regularly juicing anymore. I love green juice. Sometimes if we go out, since we're not eating in restaurants, we might go to a restaurant or a store that has fresh made green juice and have our little green juice cocktail. But I'm not juicing regularly because in my current SOS-free plaque reduction diet regimen, I am working on reducing calories because extra weight can increase your risk of disease, can increase your risk of cancer, can increase your risk of plaque, chronic disease. Got that? So for me, I would prefer to consume all of those ingredients that I would put in a juice. I prefer to consume them in a salad or even in a smoothie where I'm getting the fiber, so I get that satiated feeling. I feel full and I don't desire to consume more food. I'm getting the same amount of calories, I'm getting the same amount of nutrition. It may not get into the body as fast as when you juice, but it gets there. And it comes with all of that fiber, which is helping in calorie restriction. It's helping with consuming less calories. You get more of that feeling of being full and satisfied. So that's my current logic with juicing. And sometimes if I'm just craving a juice or I'm feeling low energy, which is rare these days, I'll make a juice. I'll grab a juice. I love green juice. Getting back to that study, it was highlighted, one of the things that was highlighted, that Asian American Pacific Islander women had the fastest increase in both age groups, 2.7% and 2.5% per year, respectively. Consequently, young Asian American Pacific Islander women had the second lowest rate in 2000, but the highest rate in 2021. It went from 57.4 per 100,000 to 86.3 per 100,000, alongside white women, which are now at 86.4 per 100,000. They add, surpassing black women 81.5 per 100,000. So basically what we are looking at is Asian Pacific Islander women almost 25 years ago had almost half the rate of breast cancer than white women or black women. And now they're all practically the same, 86.3%, 86.4%, 81.5%. What is the difference? I remember Dr. John McDougall talking about his experience in the Philippines and comparing different generations of Asians as they came from their country of origin to the United States. And he would talk about the grandparents who were healthy and slim because their native diet was full of plant food and very little, if any, animal products. And as the generations proceeded, the next generation was fatter and not as healthier, and the third generation was worse. And we're seeing it here in 25 years, this tremendous increase in breast cancer in Asian Pacific Islander women. Did they mention that? No. Now, the unfortunate thing as well is that not only are people coming to this country that came from a place where they ate healthier, but we're also exporting the standard American diet all over the world. So China, they're having increased chronic disease rates as well because they're eating more like us. They're eating more processed food. They're eating more dairy. They're eating more animal flesh. The evidence is there globally. This study does give themselves a pat on the back, saying that overall breast cancer death rate continues to decline significantly, and that's a good thing. But the question is, well, I have many questions, but one of the questions is, what has had to happen in order to get that death rate to decline? Invasive surgery? Drugs? And is there any Is there any symptom? Is there any risk of taking certain drugs over time that will prevent breast cancer, for example, but won't prevent some sort of death that's related to that toxin continually in your body? And why would anyone want to live with this knowing that their cancer could come back at any time? And that's why they have to take a maintenance drug, which many people do today. My recommendation is a super clean, whole food, plant diet, lots of exercise, yes, good sleep, clean environment. We haven't talked about endocrine disruptors in the plastics and the perfumes and the makeups and the cleaning products that can find their way into our homes that increase risk of cancer. All that needs to go. And it's really not that complicated. But it depends on what you want. My only problem with this report is it's not reporting on everything that is important to this subject. And that's all I got. This program is called It's All About Food, and I love talking about yummy, delicious food that's not only healthy but nutritious. Because when we're making changes to clean up our diet, to get away from the convenience of industrial food, to get away from the convenience of ready-made food, to get away from the convenience and luxury of eating in a restaurant, which is loaded with salt, oil, and sugar. I like to offer recipes. Some of them are very simple that you can make at home and enjoy on your journey to getting healthier and cleaning up your diet and lifestyle. I'm going to talk about cornbread today. Now, if you've been following this program since 2009, you've heard me talk many times about cornbread. We posted a recipe in 2011. I believe the original recipe may have included the option to add oil, salt, and sugar. It's up to you. But over time, we added substitutions. For example, my favorite sweetener to replace sugar in many baked goods and to replace other liquid sweeteners is to use our apricot jam, which is simply dried organic apricots. We take a pound, cook them in 3 cups of water, blend it up, and it fills a couple of jars, and we use that either as a spread on bread or anything you want to sweeten. And it has a nice light orange color, so it won't impact the color of your baked goods at all. I also like to make date paste. I do the same thing. I take a pound of pitted medjool dates, cook them in 3 cups of water, and make a very sweet paste that is excellent in adding to baked products. So that's what I use to sweeten the cornbread. Oil is easy to not use. You can use baking paper, pour your batter in there. You don't have to worry about it sticking to the pan. And salt. I've left salt out of my recipes for a long time, but baking powder. I talked last week, was it, about my baking powder replacement discovery? So now it's on my mind to go through every recipe I posted that has baking powder in it and see if I can replace it with carbonated water. And I did that yesterday with cornbread, and my mind is blown. I think the cornbread without the baking powder is the best I have ever had. Now, in our cornbread recipe, you can use a plant milk, for example, to wet the batter, and I substituted that with carbonated water. So it's a lighter feeling, and I don't know if there's a way to carbonate plant milk. I suppose there is, if I wanted to get that fat in it from the plant milk, a nut milk or something in there to make it richer, but I'm putting that aside for now. I made a very simple cornbread. What I did was I used polenta, which is a coarse grind of dried corn. and I put it in the Vitamix to make a finer grind. It's important because you can't really bake with polenta. It doesn't cook well unless it's already cooked, and then you bake with it, I suppose. But using it as a flour, it needs to be a finer grind. So I grinded it, and I use 1 cup of cornmeal to 1 cup of some kind of gluten-free flour. So you can use an all-purpose gluten-free flour. I don't buy all-purpose gluten-free flours anymore. I don't even use flour very often anymore. But occasionally, when I do, I'll do something like grinding up what I have in the refrigerator of grains. So I made 1 cup of flour. Probably a little more. I used 3/4 cup of rolled oats and 1/4 cup of garbanzo bean flour, and I ground that up together and mixed it with the ground polenta. And then I added 1.5 cups of carbonated water, 1/4 cup of my apricot jam, and ground flax seeds, 2 tablespoons ground flax seeds. A very simple mix. Poured the batter into a pan, cooked it at 400 for 15 minutes, and then dropped the temperature down to 350 so that the top doesn't burn. And the total cooking time was about a half hour. Oh, I added 1/2 cup of frozen corn. I thought that would help air out the mixture a little, make it a little fluffier, and I just love those juicy little bits of corn. It came out so good. Oh my God. And the elimination of baking powder. So baking powder adds a version of salt because it has sodium in it, sodium bicarbonate. But it always tasted very metallic to me. And in many recipes that have baking powder, you always have to balance it with a sweetener. And that hides that metallic taste. I call it metallic. Maybe it isn't metallic, but it's just an unpleasant aftertaste. I'm so happy to be able to remove baking powder from my recipes. And it looks like cornbread may be a featured item more frequently on our dining room table. And now is a great time to have cornbread. It's such an autumn kind of recipe. It goes well into the holidays and Thanksgiving. I hope you will try it. And it's fun because you can add other things to it. So I added the frozen corn. You could make it a breakfast bread by adding blueberries. You could make it a little more nutritious by adding kale to it. Use your imagination. Sometimes I like to sprinkle some pumpkin seeds on top. It's a lovely, lovely treat. And speaking of holidays, I just re-edited our Halloween video. So you might want to visit responsibleeningandliving.com and view that again. It's fun. It's quick. Before we had the fun part of the video mingled with the cooking part, I separated everything so you only can watch the stuff you're interested in. But it is fun. We do highlight some of our recipes. I will acknowledge they are not salt, oil, and sugar free. But for those of you who aren't doing this thing, you may enjoy our cashew cheese fondue, our chocolate fondue. These are great recipes for a Halloween party. So I invite you to check out our Halloween video. One more story I just want to tell you before we go, because it does have to do with food. Sort of. I have a KitchenAid oven. I've talked about it a few times. For example, I had it for 10 years before I knew it had a dehydrator option on it. It's a really nice range. It's gas. We've cooked a lot on this oven. And some time ago, one of the glass panes in the oven door was cracked. And then it really broke. And the range itself, it's fine. I don't want to go through not just the expense, but the waste of taking out an oven and replacing it with a new one, because there's so much energy that goes into making these appliances, whatever. You know, I'm trying to do my part, taking care of the environment, whatever. If I can repair an appliance, and it's not that difficult, I will. We took the door out. We took it apart. we got to the place where the broken glass was. I had already ordered a new piece of glass to go with it. But there were these 6 or 8 screws around the glass, the frame keeping the glass in place, and I could not remove 3 screws. Could not remove them. I sprayed it with WD-40 and gave up. Could not do it. We put the oven door back, and we were using it with cracked glass, which was upsetting me. Well, my apartment super was just here to do some other work, and I just asked if he could do me a favor, and I took the oven door apart again and asked him if he could remove the 3 frozen screws that I could not remove, and he just did it. He just saved the day. And this is the importance, here's the message, of having either the right tools or at least knowing the people that do. Now I don't need to replace my oven. I've saved some money, I've saved some time, I've saved some stress. And I think as soon as I replace that glass, I might bake myself something else because I'm so thrilled. And this is true in the kitchen of other appliances because we do live in a society that stresses convenience, and there are some appliances that create convenience for us. Some of them I think are a little bit over the top and aren't necessary, but some of them can be really helpful. I resisted for a long time getting a Vitamix. I thought my blender was sufficient. And when we finally got one, I couldn't imagine living without it. I do so many things with it, and it has enhanced my life. So I encourage researching and getting the right tools you need, right down to a high-quality screwdriver, which apparently I did not have. But just continuing on this subject before we go on the appliances in a kitchen that I personally think I cannot do without, the Vitamix, or a similar high-powered blender. There are others out there I've used that I don't particularly care for. I like the Vitamix. Their customer service is also excellent if you need to repair something or replace something. A food processor, we use that all the time. We have a water distiller going because, as I mentioned in the beginning of the program, the importance of clean, pure water. And I want us to all to be able to have access to water. Tap water is great, but we need to clean it at the source in our home. And I recommend distillation. That's a whole nother topic. But other appliances, I've talked about this before, but there are coffee makers that make coffee where you have individual portions in the little plastic containers. I don't encourage that. Learn how to make your coffee with a French press, something really simple. It's not going to save you that much time, and the experience, in my opinion, is going to be so much better. I'm not a coffee drinker. You know I'm a tea drinker, and I'm not into drinking tea in tea bags. Okay, am I getting a little extreme for you now? Loose leaf tea, I have these wonderful little containers that have, well, maybe it was an extravagant purchase, but it's a press. It's a filter for tea, where I pour the tea in and it has a filter on the top, so when I pour it out, the tea is filtered. But you can do the same thing with just a simple little strainer cup. Many, many options to bring quality dining and drinking into your home. I also want to add, I'm not at liberty to give detail yet, but this is a stay tuned. You will hear about it very soon. I was recently given a plant milk maker. Do you have one of those? I have never really needed one, but since it was given to me, I'm enjoying using it and the technology today. I'm kind of going back to the beginning of the program where I talked about how technology has changed in decades, in just a few decades. But our juicers and our plant milk makers, the new ones out there today, are amazing in terms of getting the most juice, but getting the most milk out of your starting materials and getting a really dry pulp behind, which you can use in different things if you choose to. But some of them are amazing. I'm not going to talk about brands right now because I just got a very new product and I'll let you know about it very soon. But I enjoyed making an almond milk, and I'm going to go back now and start making soy milk again and see if I can make it so that it doesn't have that paint-like quality. I don't know if you remember, I think it was during the pandemic we started making soy milk because I really don't like buying my soy milk in those brick containers. I would rather be able to make it and save on wasting that material. But we found that homemade soy milk kind of tastes like paint. And I had learned from Yoko Shinner that you don't want to soak the soy milk. You don't want to soak the soybeans first. You just want to cook them and strain them. And that helped, but it still had this paint-like flavor. So anybody out there making their soy milk and have any recommendations, I'm open because I'm going to start very soon, now that I have this great new plant milk maker, to making soy milk again. All right, have we covered enough material today? SOS-free, breast cancer, diet, exercise, lifestyle, cornbread with carbonated water, the amazing arc of technology over the decades. Next week, we'll be talking to Ella Majors, Sexy Fit Vegan, because I'm really into this fit vegan thing. It's not just diet, it's also lifestyle, exercise, etc. And the week after that, we'll be talking with Dr. Ellen Storm, who has written a book called Diseases Have Causes. And it is a really unique book. And I'm in the middle of reading it. I can't wait to finish it and talk with you about it on It's All About Food in 2 weeks. Thank you for joining me. I am Caryn Hartglass. You've been listening to It's All About Food. One request. If you're listening on a podcast app, can you rate our show there? Anywhere you're listening, can you give us a thumbs up? We could really use the endorsement. And that's all I'm going to ask you. I'm giving you my time every hour. If you choose to listen to this program, I am grateful. But if you could give us a nice rating, that would be a delicious gift. In the meantime, everybody have a delicious week.